Hello and welcome to Mythinform's Cultural Insanity, Episode 2, where myself, Brian Edward, and Jake are going to be discussing, as appropriate, the cultural insanity of the time. And right now, I think I haven't met a single person that doesn't think that we live in some kind of polarized culture. Whether you're on the left, right, apolitical, everybody feels it. So what we're trying to do is dissect some things in a way that we feel is we're trying to avoid bias. And in fact, this topic that we're talking about today is going to be general empiricism versus skepticism in the new age of fake news and even deep fakes. How can we read news and affect our biases, either take them out, or what do we do when we read biased news, and how do we make sense of it? Jake, where do you want to go? Like, if I really think if we get into deep fakes, and like the deep fakes being, you know, that you have, for people that have not heard of this, like you can take 3 pictures of somebody, have generally a recording of them, and the computer will translate this and can make them, like, you can make a video of this person to say whatever you want. Right? So you could have...
You got to build it, Brian. You can't just dive in there. That's what we want to peek at for this podcast.
But I don't know. But what I was going to say this. If deepfakes come around, like, everything's gone, right? Twitter ceases as any kind of mode of news. Because right now, actually, Twitter's a great place of news. It's not the best place to get opinion, but as far as like to get ahead of everything, they're always a couple days ahead of like the mainstream media. I mean, you can look on Twitter and you can figure out what's going to be in the mainstream media news. And this is always true on the weekend. So, like, it's one of the reasons why I've gotten some of my clients on Twitter, because they're like, why do you seem to be so up on everything? I'm like, well, it's because I'm a couple days ahead from Twitter. But if everything is a fake on Twitter, if everything, like, if I can just make a video of you saying things that you didn't actually say, then Twitter's done.
Right.
So, and what
we'll get there.
Well, think about it too. Language as an adaptive, like, evolutionary trait, right? We're the only animals that we know that use verbal language to communicate. Like, for this to be a positive adaptation, which no doubt is, you have to be telling the truth most of the time, right? If there was 50% lies and 50% truth, language never evolves because it wouldn't help us. So I think the reason why language is a positive for us is because we mostly tell the truth. What do you think?
That's an interesting question to start with this topic of what can you know. But I don't know. I think you're asking if language is a good thing.
Well, no, I'm saying that when you have, like, in a place, like if you were in a forum or in any kind of media or in a space where half of the stuff, exactly 50% of what you were told, was a lie, would you be able to do anything?
So you're saying that language only works because it's referenced to something real,
right? Language, I think language. Think evolutionary as an adaptation.
Sure, I mean
the reason
like
why we're
in the Stone Age, you have, like, you know, mammoth, like, food.
And where we are communicating verbally and non-verbally to hunt the mammoth, right? Who can kill any of us individually, but language is going to be a tool for us to work cooperatively, and we can take down bigger animals than us.
Right. But I guess I'd say that language isn't just used for physical things like that. There's more subtle thing or subjective things like ideas and happiness and stuff. Like, how does that play? I mean,
what I'm saying is, I don't think that language would be a benefit to the species if most people lied. The reason why it's benefit is because most people tell the truth. So you can usually say, when someone tells you something, it's probably true.
So you're saying, like, lying is bad because if everybody lied, then...
Right, and this is why lying is bad, because this is the reason, right? Because this is an advantage only if mostly we tell the truth. If 50% of the time you turn on the water faucet and you get poison, like, you can't have that, right? In fact, the water faucet, that really needs to be 99.999%. Sure. But language, like, at some point you can pollute it with enough lies to where it doesn't help you.
Right, but I mean, it's not too hard to think of an example where lying would probably be a better case to do in a scenario. You know, if a murderer comes to your door and is looking for someone, they says, "Are they here?" And you can say, "Well, yeah, they're right inside." Are you going to tell them that?
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
You'd argue that lying in that case is a net benefit to society. Some would say it's not. I mean, you get kind of some weird philosophical implications of your actions,
that's the point.
But maybe you're getting to the point where you're saying that, like your water, it's okay to be truthful 99.999% of the time, but there's some fringe cases. But I guess, you know, what makes those fringe cases? Like,
yeah, well, I mean, that's a weird case where, you know, you're trying to defend yourself. And this is not a case where we're trying to work cooperatively, right? If you're breaking in to try to murder me and, like, you're trying to hunt somebody down, or, like, oh, fine, that somebody's the Gestapo, they're breaking in on us, we're hiding Jews, and they're like, where are they? Right? And we're not going to tell them where they are, right? No, we are not working cooperatively in that case, right? But if we are, we're supposed to be working cooperatively, I guess, is Americans to kind of fix things.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. Like, do you consider, is it a necessity that we in American society must work cooperatively with each other? I think there's a big case in made that a lot of capitalism is not necessarily cooperative. It's just looking out for your own best interest.
Well, no, but you're working cooperatively with your team of capitalists for company A.
I'd say it's more game theory where you're just assuming everybody's going to make certain decisions. You're not trusting everyone's going to do what's best for society.
True.
You're just kind of thinking ahead and saying, if I were this person, what would make me the best off? And you're acting like it's the prisoner's dilemma.
Right. Well, it is. Okay, but take athletics. You have two competing football teams. Are they working cooperatively or are they opposing each other?
Depends on the context. I mean, they're both working cooperatively to put on a show to make money for their respective schools.
Correct. And they're playing by the same rules. Out of bounds is the same for the offense and the defense. Right. But still, some of those can be subjective. But out of bounds, 10 yards for a first down. It's not like the Packers need 11 yards and the Bears need 10. Right. So in some ways, playing by the same rules is what allows competitive cooperation. And this is why company A versus company B needs to be governed by the same rules in order for cooperation to work right.
It's like, it's not all that it's cooperation. There's also competition within it as well.
But for effective competition, it's been in politics, right? Politics should be effective competition between Republicans and Democrats or whatever parties you have.
I've got thought of before you. If you're saying that effective competition requires cooperation, is the inverse true? Does effective cooperation require competition?
You could say that. I think capitalists absolutely believe that. You know, I mean that's part of that. So if you're capitalist to any degree or subscribe to that, you would say yes. Yeah, I mean to push it back, right? You were trying to push forward, and that this gets the best out of us. This is one of the reasons why sports are so big, right? This is why we really wanted women more into sports, so you can get the benefits of that team cooperation.
Do you think that in order to succeed in a system, do you need to know all the rules? Or can you just kind of play off what other people around you are doing?
No, I mean, you have to learn the rules, right? So if you're new...
Do you?
Huh?
Do you need to?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you want to be respected, right? I mean, if you're a good player, right, and in a good football game, you'll see even the losing team and the winning team shake hands, you know, or some people congratulate, like, you can really respect your competitor. Now, you can also hate your competitor, right? Sometimes you see these blood feuds.
I guess what I'm getting at is I think the better athlete, I think the better competitor is one who is more open to the system within which they are operating, they're able to know that's like subject to change. Where someone who fully buys into the idea that this system is the rules, these rules will not change, they're the ones who end up being, thrown aside pretty easily if like the system ever does change. And we know like by every system in the world that's ever existed has changed.
Yeah, sure. But you have to agree to the changes. Right, and you have to be aware of them, and there has to be at least general agreement.
I think generally players in any game, whether it be sport, whether it be economic, whether it be interpersonal, I think those players are rarely the ones enacting the changes that then affect the relationship in that game. Very rarely.
No, right, but they've agreed to do it. Like with the new rules, that you're not allowed to. There's no blindside blocking. Right, they're calling this all the time now. At least I've seen this in the college games that I've watched. So if you're downfield offensively blocking and that guy's not looking, you're allowed. If he's looking in your face, you can block him. But if he's not, you can't blindside block, and they're calling it all the time. Even though it's not targeting, you're not hitting the helmet. They have to be aware that you're there.
What if his eyes are closed?
I don't know. No, he's looking at you. If his eyes are closed, I think it's okay. But if he's facing you,
okay.
But if he's not, like that, they'll call it. Okay, so they had to adjust to that rule, but everybody's aware of it, and they're calling it fairly on both sides. So as long as they're calling it fairly on both sides, then you can learn to adapt. But if they're not calling it fairly on both sides, then you get this situation where the other team is no longer competitive cooperation. They're the enemy.
Well, I think sport analogies are very good for kind of illustrating a point, but they're not very indicative of how the real world actually works. I mean, let's take a more of a political or a economic example. So like when, they make tax changes, I was reading an article yesterday about, how the IRS just finds it's more cost effective for them to go after poor people. Just because it's so much easier, it takes so much less time to go through their tax returns. So they end up being the targets of most of IRS audits, even though it's probably the people who have the most money who are the ones kind of taking advantage of the most tax laws.
But that's weird. That's surprising to me because like they would have less to take.
Well, they have less to take, but it's faster to go through them. They're more likely to have made a mistake. People who are richer tend to be working with someone who knows laws, or at least knows the loopholes in laws, and is able to hide their assets much, much better. And to send someone after these richer people, you need to have a lot more experience. And when you have that kind of experience, there's usually better paying jobs than working for the IRS.
Yeah. That'd be interesting in what case. I know that the Obama administration went for like the foreign account holders in a big way back in like 2011. So there was a huge push to go, and like these were definitely not poor people. If you're stashing millions of dollars offshore,
right? Was it like I don't remember this. Was it like a real push, or was it just like a like smoke and mirrors? Like
no. They went after. So what they did was they gave a safe harbor, and they said, look, we know that this
going
is
after if they have a safe harbor.
No, they said this. They said to everybody, there was a lot of people that weren't reporting it. You're allowed to have an account, say in India or in the Cayman Islands, but what you can't do is then hide the interest. So you made $200,000 of interest in the Cayman Islands, and you need to report that. You need to report the existence of the account, even if the money was just sitting over there and you made nothing on it. Okay. You have to say, I have $5 million in the Cayman Islands, and then if you made 10,000 interest, you need to report that. Now, a lot of these people weren't doing it. Then you could link that to, say, a credit card that you could spend, and you could spend interest-free money. So what the government did was said, all right, we know that these are out here. If you will self-report to us, we will not prosecute you. You're going to have to surrender 25% of the account. Meaning, so if you have $1 million in this offshore account, you're going to have to give us $250 of the principal. But if you do, we will not come after you. You'll be clean and you won't be prosecutable. Just follow the law from now on. If you don't, we're going to take 50% of the account and we're going to prosecute you for tax evasion.
They find it.
And that's what they did. And there was, most people came forward. But there were many cases that were all over online of, people rolling the dice on that and having to pay tons and tons of fines. And what they did was, to enforce it, they went to India, they went to Switzerland, they went to the Cayman Islands and said, look, if you don't cooperate with our investigators in the IRS, we're not going to do business with you. And there was all these countries that were like, well, crap, we can't like not do business with the U.S. Right. So all of a sudden, your Swiss bank account where nobody said anything, they had the Swiss were over there squealing. Here's
an example where, getting back to kind of our game analogies, like every player in this game knows the rules and everybody's taking a calculated risk, judging by those. But another example, another article I was reading about these, I think they called them accidental Americans. These were children of foreign parents who, were born on vacation here and they were brought back to Ireland and have lived there their whole lives, and they're technically American citizens. And because of that, because of the way the IRS works, they owe American income tax.
Oh, wow.
So lately there's been a new round of this. I don't know what spurned it. Maybe our precarious economic situation. But these people over in like Ireland and England are getting these tax notices from the IRS saying you have like 2 weeks to turn in your taxes, and they don't even have a social security like card or number even.
Wow.
So I guess,
isn't that if they traveled to the United States, they would be in trouble?
Probably. They probably won't be able to leave until they pay, or until they get there through like court and all that.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that. What did they do? There was any redress for these people?
They're kind of just screwed, really. So hopefully the IRS just like lets them live. I mean, there's an idea of like willfulness, if you're willfully ignoring paying the U.S. taxes, or if you're not. I mean, if it's, I think that thing, if it's under a certain amount, they're just like this is probably accidental and it's really not worth our time to track it down. Yeah. But more to my point, though, in your example with these offshore accounts with millions and millions of dollars, every player in this game knows the rules. So you could argue it's fair. See if some even get away with it, even though that's not fair. But everybody's playing by the same rules.
Yeah. No, that was totally fair.
In this example, though, like these people who live abroad, who are American citizens and are subject to rules of the system, don't know these rules. Is this still a fair system if they're not aware of the rules? Or
well, I mean, I think for that particular case, you can say that this is that's bullshit, and that you need some fair way to make redress for those people.
Okay, but like the U.S. government's like making these rules that they have no say in this whatsoever.
I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, are they eligible to vote? I would think, right? So the American citizens.
I'd imagine so.
Huh. So technically, they do have a voice.
I think it'd be interesting.
But what state would they claim residence in? I guess the state they were born in, right?
I suppose so.
That's really weird. But then to do that, to prove your resident state, you probably would have to like, could you actually get a voting card?
The process was your birth certificate would say like Nashville, Tennessee, and you need to send that in to like the U.S. office, and they would have to send you back a social security card, which then would have you, I guess, a citizen of Tennessee, even though you like an expat.
Right. I guess we'd have to look then. What does it take to get to be able to like register to vote in Tennessee? Because if you could probably make a claim that you don't have representation. Let's say that, well, then they need a social security card and they need an address in Tennessee. And you're like, well, I don't have one. And if you can't meet the voting requirements for any state, now you actually don't have representation. And therefore
you just considered homeless by the law?
I don't know. I really don't know. There has to be law that governs this. I just don't know what it is.
I guess, but the point I'm trying to get to here is, here's clearly an example. Like ideally in every case, you could be a part of this game where everyone participating knows the rules, and even if you want to break the rules, you're taking a calculated risk. You're taking perceived chance of you being caught for breaking the rules and the perceived cost of breaking the rules, and kind of weighing them against each other and seeing if it's worth it versus the gain. But I think more often than not, people aren't aware of the full rules of the system. I guess how can you ever be sure that you are fully aware of the rules in the system you're playing?
Well, this is what lawyers are for, right? I mean, not
just politically, but
if we're setting up a business and we're gonna like sell food, there's all kinds of like rules and regulations that we're gonna have to follow, and we're going to have to look them up. And we can either do that ourselves, but most likely we're gonna hire an attorney that knows this, and probably one that's worked in the food industry and is familiar with these regulations.
Sure. That's a fleshed out example, but I'm saying more socially, like the rules of society.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is why we have some cultural insanity, because we have deep disagreements on the rules, on the basic cultural rules of engagement right now.
Right. Well, I guess let me ask you, what can you know? ? What can you know?
What can I know? Period. I don't know. Well, you can know with certain degrees of certainty, right? I science is my good example here. What can you know? The gravity is, what was it, 9.86 meters per second squared?
9.6 meters per second squared.
Something like that, yeah. 9.8. But whatever it is. You can know. And you have evidence that's building up. Evolution, you have mountains of evidence building up. So you have a high degree of certainty, but you never say 100%, but you just say enormous degrees of certainty. But then you have other things that have much less degrees of certainty. So I don't know, you take a hunch, and but what are people comfortable with? But it's different. With your water, that water coming out of the tap, you need to be 99.999% certain that doesn't have cholera in it.
Do you?
Yes, it needs to be highly, but but other things you don't know.
You need to be certain.
Yeah, I need to be certain.
Have you tested the water yourself?
No, but I already have the high enough degree of certainty where I don't need to test it.
How do you know? Because you haven't tested it yourself. That's very unscientific of you, Brian.
Okay, well we would have access to cholera. We'd have access to cholera data. We can look that up and be reasonably certain we're not being lied to. Right now we trust in our institutions, right? We need to, like, the FDA is generally trusted, right? When you see something on like something.gov and the FBI, these are institutions that need to be generally trusted. Like this is one of the big problems with the whole Mueller and Trump thing, and the deep state, with Trump's being leaks, so right now the big thing is like Trump staffers are people in the different security departments leaking stuff to the press. So now, he's not going to trust it. What does Trump do then? Fire everybody and hire in a completely Trumpian FBI? Or security. I was like, you don't want a highly partisan security. You need the military is another one. You need that to be bipartisan.
It also doesn't make him look very innocent.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But what I'm saying is, like, you don't, like, the fact that he hasn't fired all these people is a good thing. But the thing is, they don't trust him, so they're leaking. You heard it here
first.
They're leaking. But the military is probably the biggest one, where you need to have faith that the military aren't partisan hacks, right? Because once you do that, once they are, now, I mean, if you're going to throw a coup, you need the military. So the person that controls the military, and they're partisan, and they're going to side with that guy. That's how you get it. Yeah.
I guess I depends what your definition of partisan hack is. Like, I think there's a lot of I think overwhelmingly the military service tends to be right wing leaning, but I think for a lot of the people I've at least heard interviews from, that's while they are conservative, while they are Republican, this is not at all like what comes to mind when they do their
duty. They're pretty progressive.
They have a job, and they do it.
Medicine is less PC than the military. Like, in medicine, you can still things, because it's, I don't know, the amount of PC is considerably less, but like what you can get away with in the military, you can't, not much. Like,
well, I guess I don't know.
Again, that's not scientific, but in my in my opinion, the military is buttoned up, or at least they're making an attempt to get buttoned up on sexism and things like that. They're doing a reasonably decent job. But now, remember, the military's got different issues there. The military is typically all male, and they're just getting women for the first time. Medicine's always had women.
Okay.
Even if they've only been nurses, right? And there hadn't been many female doctors. There's always been a huge degree of female participation in medicine as a whole.
So I guess the argument you're making here is that we can't really know much in the pure sense of the word, but we have institutions who can tell us things that like we can relatively trust.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that you have to, what your parents, like when you have blind trust in your parents when you're a kid.
Well, I think at a certain point we all learn that's not the correct way to go.
Well, yeah.
At the same time.
But no, but at some point that's where you get the weird teenage angst. The teenage angst is when you find out your parents aren't perfect.
And I think it evolves. You don't recover from the teenage angst. It just turns into the person you become, in my opinion.
I think you adult through the teenage angst, and then you realize, wow, my parents actually did an all right job.
One of the question here is that this teenage angst, this kind of question of authority, when you realize that the authority, capital A authority, you want to take that religiously if you want, can be wrong, it kind of creates this crack that kind of skepticism in general creates.
No, I agree.
What authority can you believe? And I think that gives rise to a lot of these.
Sure.
The distrust of the institutions, the conspiracy theories. And all it takes is just one conspiracy theory, and then it really kind of shatters not shatters, but really takes a blow to the foundation of the idea that institutions can be trusted. We can believe what they say and take that as the scientific evidence for how we should live our lives.
Well, imagine if you're abused as a kid, right? That now you didn't get to establish that, at least the trust with authority with your parents, because you're being abused. Is that person going to maybe have a harder time trusting institutions? Maybe. I would think like that could derail it. Now you could overcome that, right. Sure. But I mean, abused kids, like, the group of abused kids versus, parents that actually parented well. And obviously the latter have the advantage.
Sure. But like we learned that, at least from our parents, we learned that institutions, while not evil per se, but they can be wrong. Institutions can be wrong. So why should we then trust these institutions that exist in our lives? Yeah. I mean, why are conspiracy theorists seen as crazy when all the evidence would show that we should be skeptical of these things? We should be looking into these things, but instead we just kind of brush them off and consider them the fringe of society.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You were hugely neurodiverse.
Are we the crazy ones for not being conspiracy theorists?
No, I don't think so. But you have to be we're neurodiverse, for a reason, right? I mean, there's just the people that are eccentrics, people that are meat and potatoes kind of people. You have all kinds of different personalities, and all these things probably work out for the benefit. But you do have to have at least some order and trust. I mean, you could take it down to the smallest, unit of the family, right? Then, if one, if it's the father or the mother that's running the family, well, you're going to have some trust around that person. There has to be at least some trust in the hierarchy for things to work. I mean, this is even true in prison, that you have to
family is a prison. So you're saying.
Yeah. But I'm saying that if you want things to break down, kill the trust. You do not want your social institutions, especially when you have a society this big, to break down. Like if you have, just the chief, if we're living in a tribe of 100, it's a lot easier to trust because we're going to know everybody. It's going to, the institution has been conserved for a long, long time. We've probably participated in that institution our whole lives. It's going to be a lot easier to get on board. But in a society of a couple 100 million people, without trust in the major institutions, I think that's military, university, like police and judges, things like that those are mostly working right. And other economic laws, the businesses are generally being held to the same things.
Sure.
Without that, things are going to go to shit.
I agree from a practical standpoint, but kind of like something you said earlier, doesn't distrust, the fact that we have to have these trust in these institutions, this makes us ripe for the exploitation by a few bad actors in the millions.
Yeah. And that there needs to be watchdogs, right? So there needs to be skeptical
How
people.
Can you trust them?
Right. Well, I don't know. You're going to have to get broad agreement. I mean, this is where you've got to get broad agreement from different sides. In case we have a two-party system, you generally have to have a general agreement, general bipartisan agreement that these are the rules.
If there was one institution in this country that you would put your full trust in, what would it be?
The military. Is probably. I would say that has the broadest support too.
Fascinating. I would have gone like NASA or something like that.
Really?
But yeah,
Okay.
interesting.
I'd say the military, like right now, the universities are really losing their
I
support
don't know,
from
man.
the right.
I've seen, I guess it's not the military, but I've seen Jason. I've seen The Bourne Identity. I know what happens back there.
You know,
I've seen Transformers, man. I know what they.
I think like, you know, like the CIA and national, like the NSA and things like that don't have, but the military, I think they do. I don't see any, there's very few people that are saying, you know, the troops are evil. You don't see the Vietnam thing anymore where people like troops are coming back and people throwing eggs at them.
True. I don't think troops are as in public with their troopness either anymore because of some scars from their past times like that.
But it's still, I don't, it's
Like
not looked at. No one's doing
outside of
that.
Veterans Day. I don't think you could really ever point to a person and tell that they were like a person in the army.
But still, but if somebody walks into a train on something on a uniform, generally you the most that's going to be a good thing most of the time. In fact, drug dealers and stuff like that will try to co-opt that and will then dress up in a military uniform trying to co-opt that respect so they don't get searched or they're not looked at on negatively. You know, why are they not doing like NASA or something like that? I think that they're aware that that's probably one of the respected institutions.
You think? Oh, I wonder if you walked around in a lab coat and like really like nerdy lab outfit, like if people would, I bet you'd have the same respect.
I don't know. Who knows? But remember that guy when they landed that thing on Mars and, you know, and they showed up and he was just a damn sexist because he was wearing that damn t-shirt. So
it was a pretty tacky t-shirt.
It was, but he was actually made for him by like a woman that he knew really well, and she had asked him to wear this. So
no, teach their own. I guess institutions at large. I think while we can argue maybe about the merits of what the most trustworthy system is, it's really not the most entertaining thing. But I think if you were to ask someone what is the most untrustworthy institution, they'd give you one of two answers. What do you think those two answers are?
Generally, I'd say the media.
Okay.
Oh God, second most untrustworthy system. Oof.
This is just my opinion, but
Go ahead.
I think just the government in general.
Okay.
The two big things,
Yeah.
and inevitably the two biggest things that have the most control over how we perceive the world and the rules of which we play in it.
Yeah.
So doesn't that seem a little backwards that these most trusted institutions are the ones setting the rules for all the most untrusted,
Right.
are setting the rules for all these games that we are required to play by nature of us living in this society. We do live in a society.
That's true, but right, and the government used to have like a high degree of trust, right? And this is post World War II.
Post like Alexander
It
the
did.
Great, or
Like even American society, like post World War II, the government had a high degree of trust, and then it started to fade. You know, and part of like conspiracy theories, part of that is how did we get to? I mean, the distrust of government, like from say 1945 to 1965. Well, 1945 is probably a high degree of trust in government. Things are going well, the economy's starting to boom, and we're the only industrialized nation that's not destroyed. So we've got like all the business, right? There's really no competition. In fact, Truman he wouldn't let the steel people, like he kept the prices fixed, and they didn't want that. They wanted, just
what a coincidence.
So then all of a sudden we rebuild, where the Marshall Plan is successful in rebuilding Europe and Japan. And even say by 1965, like German steel's like out competing, like man, now you wonder, well, you're losing your jobs. Maybe you do. Doesn't that breed distrust in government? Like, well, God, we let you run wild for 20 years and we're getting whipped.
I think after World War II, the world kind of expands open. I see even before that, the world was pretty segmented off, and this really kind of brought, for better or probably worse, probably, but I guess the golden lining of like the world wars is that it really created the world as a whole. These countries from being isolated, they kind of realize the dependence on each other that you need, and going forward, it's created this world that's much bigger than just you and the community that you see around you. But I guess the bad side of this is that you're not able to perceive this world. You are only able to perceive this world through what's shown to you, through the news, through the media, through movies. Probably movies actually maybe give you a better picture of the world than the media tends to. But
possibly.
But with kind of the advent of this, the media has become the route to how people, like everything someone in Wisconsin, barring a friend of ours, knows about Japan could come solely from the media. But at that point, what can you what can you know about Japan? Can you really trust the media to like tell you what that? Like, should you?
Well, you probably shouldn't, right?
Should you trust that?
Read
Should
books.
you trust that?
Books. Like I think, yeah.
Books can't have lies in them.
Well, they can, but when you're reading like authors, like books can really help. Now, obviously, you can have partisan books, but the more you read, the better you're going to do, because like you can have a lot more nuance in books than you can in media.
What makes them different? Books are media. I mean, like YouTube videos or like articles.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you could have a book on tape, so you could put it on YouTube. But no, like books, you have chapters. You can lay your argument out. You can go into detail. You can give tons and tons of supporting evidence. You can tease out every little nuance. Right? Whereas you cannot do that. Even in a long form podcast that Joe Rogan does for 2-3 hours, you still can't get in depth to what a book does. I mean, they pitch books in a 3-hour podcast, and then you read the book and you always get more.
So you're kind of getting to the point that while an individual piece of electronic internet media might be not as trustworthy as a book, if you dedicate your time to aggregate all these sources to kind of get a bigger picture of it all, then that could be better?
Yeah, you're going to be better, right? But that's going to require a heck of a lot of reading. But yeah, you're going to be way more informed. Okay. The more well-read you are, the more apt you're going to be in being able to point out bias in the media.
Right.
Because you're going to be saying, well, wait a minute, what about this? You didn't cover this. You're slightly representing this and that.
Sure. That's all well and good. I think it's a great thing. If people have all the time in the world and they could research all the things, they could be so perfectly informed, but they don't have that time.
No,
and they don't have the motivation, to be honest.
Right.
So we only are exposed to a couple things in the news here and there, and I mean, the term fake news has been thrown around quite a bit in the last couple years, but I mean, it's not without merit. I don't think that is quite as fake as the word fake tends to imply, but it's certainly biased. And what do you think is an effective way to consume the news, still learn about these parts of the world, still learn about what's going on in the world that you have no other access to, without falling into the trap of whatever bias they're trying to set you up with? Do you think there is a single effective method other than just consume more news and
Well, I think you can purposely seek out like the opposite opinion. I mean, I don't really have that
opinion
much.
Isn't necessarily that much more unbiased than the.
No, it's not. But taken together,
So like
you
the
might.
Average?
Well, it's interesting if people admit their bias. So you have, say, Ben Shapiro, who's admitted conservative bias, and say Kyle Kulinski, who's admitted left-leaning bias. And they come at your perspective and say, well, according to Kyle Kulinski, this is the way it is. This XYZ is important. But then according to Ben Shapiro, he thinks X is slightly important. Y and Z aren't important at all, but A and B are important. Whereas you didn't even hear A and B from Kyle.
So you make it a logic chart, tally up which ones get referenced those.
Right. And then Ben dismissed Y and Z. And you'll think, well, but I think those are important. So I think it's interesting to come to say, well, here's a conservative perspective on X, and here's a progressive perspective on X.
Sure.
And it's different angles. I mean, look at a car straight on. You're going to get a different view than a car from the side. It's still the same car. So it's okay to say this is the perspective here. This is the perspective. And mostly, you ought to have like some intellectual humility to think that, okay, if it's a subject like Japan or something that I'm looking into for the first time, I should probably not then say, I know what's going on. That say, from what I understand, the conservative perspective is this, the progressive is this, and I don't know, the Greens think this or whatever. Like, you're going to be pretty well informed. And then, you can you don't have to know. You can say, sure, well, my best guess is this.
Just kind of get a variety of views and make your own opinion rather than like taking one person's view. I'd actively say you should stay away from taking any one person's viewpoint. Because,
absolutely. And most likely
anyone's right, including you, is very slim to none.
Yeah. And you'll find too that like if you get the run-of-the-mill conservative viewpoint, the run-of-the-mill or whatever, the mode viewpoint of the progressives, you'll probably find some things of each that you agree with. You may be leaning more towards this, but you don't have to say, well, I'm completely progressive on this issue. If 10% of the conservative ideas, you agree with those, and vice versa.
I think it's interesting you bring up people like Ben Shapiro and Kyle Kulinski. It's an example I heard a long time ago. I'm not sure who made it, but so you have two people. You need to go in for surgery and you decide between two people. One of them has spent his entire life dedicating himself to learning the exact part of the body, everything that goes into this exact surgery you're making, or that you need, so much so that he's never developed social skills. Seems very shut in and can't really communicate his thoughts very well, but he is by far the leading expert on this in the world. On the other hand, you have someone who's learned enough about the medical industry, but also spent a lot of his time working on himself as a salesman. He's kind of we're not talk people, kind of go more the psychological route, and he sells you on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every person is going to choose this guy just because he's the most convincing, even though he's not the most knowledgeable.
Right.
This is a loaded question because I think my answer is apparent, but can you trust these people who seem the most convincing, people in the media who are the loudest voices, who command the biggest crowds? Isn't that something to be almost wary of, to put a red flag just because they have these big crowds?
Well, I think, they have an obligation. The higher obligation of ethics.
Go on.
I mean, if you kind of know you're responsible for pushing an opinion, you're a YouTuber and you have 1 million followers. I mean, that's something, right? You can actually, you've got a decent sized oar in the cultural soup. You can move it a little bit. So I think, and the bigger that is, the more and more you've got to be aware that you've got to try to be as honest. You have to be ethical. Like, your ethical standards go higher. I mean, if you're in charge of something, if you're a parent, you have a higher ethical obligation than if you're just like a single person.
I agree, and I think that we would like these people to all be ethical, to hold themselves to a higher standard. But I guess just to reiterate what we said before, it just takes. We live in a system that puts us so entrusting of these figures, of these institutions, that it just takes a handful of bad actors to really take advantage of the system and craft it to benefit them and at the expense of everybody else. But
no, this is exactly like. And when things get wildly corrupt, like Tammany Hall is a great example of the U.S. for charities, right? There was no welfare system at all in the United States in, say, 1860s and 1870s. You're getting off the boat at Ellis Island and you're coming in and, New York City and so on and so forth. Like, you went to Tammany Hall. There was no federal hands on. I mean, all the charities were all private, but then Boss Tweed had so corrupted the charity system, that so wrecked the faith in that I think that's part of the upswing of like progressivism. And then later, like, a welfare state from like the federal government needs to guarantee some of this stuff, because there were more trust in the federal government than there was, like, it got so bad with Boss Tweed and those guys. The conservative argument is like, we should get rid of welfare completely, right? And go back to charities. Well, I mean, I've heard that made. That's an extreme conservative argument, but I've heard that made. Well, what happens when the charities get corrupt?
Right.
I mean, why do you say that the charities can't get corrupted? They can. We've seen it. So, I mean, that's the counter argument to that.
Like, oh no, they won't, because they're charities.
Right.
They're good things.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess kind of what I wanted to end, kind of peek at with this podcast, like I talked about earlier, is that with these, we're kind of at this cusp, I think, of we're right before the sci-fi worlds of the 80s and the 90s are about to come true. And so a theme that is actually happening is the idea of deepfakes. But before I go into that, I think it's inevitable also that at a certain point, I mean, there's even completely digital, like, pop stars that exist in some Eastern Asian countries. It's only a matter of time before
I didn't realize that.
Your Ben Shapiro's of the world, your Kyle Klinsky's of the world are replaced with something that's completely digital. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do.
You're taking the person.
Yes.
In this game that we're playing, we're assuming that the people are going to follow the rules, and because of that, everybody will benefit from it. But when you take the person out of the equation,
can you trust it?
Even more untrustworthy.
No, does it? Like, did you ever watch?
Or does it?
I don't know. Like,
does that get better?
My initial thought here. This is interesting. My initial thought was no, you won't be able to trust that. Like, that you want it. But then I thought of. Did you ever watch Star Trek Voyager?
I've not.
Right. Like, on Star Trek Voyager, like in one of the first episode, what happens is they're out in space and the doctor gets killed. So, like, their doctor is dead, so they have a holographic doctor, right? And he becomes like a character to show. And the thing is, like, he's a fake actual, he's got like his personality written in, but he's just this kind of like regular doctor. And like, you kind of get to like him and you kind of get to trust him. So yeah, like, you could, depending.
But he's also an actor playing a computer.
True. But you conceivably could get a program that advanced to simulate a personality and a hologram that good.
Passes the Turing test.
Right. Now he's doing doctoring, though. He's not giving political opinions. It'd be interesting if he were the bartender.
Is it really that different?
It might be.
Being a political pundit and being a doctor, I think have very similar.
Do they? Like in Star Wars, you watch Star Wars, right? Remember the surgeon droids? Like, that are taking care of Luke and those guys. They're robot doctors.
Go on.
No, but I don't remember anybody deeply distrusting that. I don't remember anyone saying, "Oh my God, they've got robot doctors."
Very wrong. I think there's you're in the surgery industry. You know, there's a big push to have like robotics performing certain surgeries, and there's a lot of people who are very uncomfortable about this idea, even though it's way safer. It's just way safer. It's way more precise. But there's a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with the idea of a non-human operating inside their body.
No, that's true. That's true. I guess you're right. With Voyager too, I'm suspending my disbelief in sci-fi. So you're right. That is a show.
The love of Voyager is
really
clouding your distrust of non-humans.
Yeah. Well, I tried to paint it over. No, you're right. You're right. And then there's also a lot of physicians too that saying you're going to need this. It's the argument with drones too, that you want a human control somewhere.
We live on a cusp of this world. It's about to have deepfakes. It's about to have digital pundits giving you the information about the world. How should we go into this and come out sheep any more than we already might be?
Well, I think you always have to balance your skepticism and trust.
It's going to be so much. People are, I think, already right now have a hard time figuring out what they can know and combating just all the disinformation that's out there, and it's about to get a whole lot worse.
Right, most of it's not. Let's be fair. Like most of it is actually not disinformation, right? You might have like Alex Jones when he talks about like the demons from the fourth dimension and stuff. Okay, that's disinformation, right? That's absurd. And then some of the kind of the craziest, the conspiracy theories probably qualifies disinformation. But if you could look at CNN or the Young Turks or Ben Shapiro and this and that, these are like viewpoints, and sometimes highly polarized viewpoints. They're not disinformation. If I could tell half the story, I'm telling one side of the story, I'm actually being accurate. I'm just not giving you the full picture. So I'm being a little bit deceitful, but I'm not. It's not actually disinformation. It's just I'm being the prosecutor. So I'm saying this person is guilty. They're guilty. I'm going to show you why they're guilty. They're totally guilty. And then the defense attorney's like, hang on. I'm going to show you why this person's innocent.
You're talking like a true competitor in society.
Yeah, well, you need to know that. And this is why courts, at least they do that. You have somebody that's going to be a complete defender. And so you have to listen. If you're the jury, you have to listen to the prosecutor, you have to listen to the defense attorney. You have to. So this is why I really think that people ought to read a conservative opinion. And if you're stuck in a conservative bubble, you really need to look at a progressive opinion.
Fair point. Doesn't answer my question, though.
What do you mean? Like
with deepfakes rising, like what can
deepfakes screw everything up. Like then you simply cannot trust Twitter anymore. Like if that happens with the current state of our media, I don't know what happens. It could be chaos.
Well, it's
like you're gonna disbelieve everything. Like then you're gonna kind of go with everyone's gonna go with their gut instincts.
Right. Would it just be? I guess you might be more familiar on this than I am. Actually, would it just be video that would be, I guess, picture as well?
But you could fake audio. You could fake. God, I don't know. Seeing would no longer be believing, right? So now, that's what they say. When you see a video
seeing on the internet already is believing, huh?
Right. Well, right. But see, when you get the video, if somebody says, this person said that, and you're like, link me, and then you see the video, you're like, okay, you generally will trust, well, you may not agree that, oh, well, that's not what he was saying or something, but at least you know what he said. Or you might be like, oh, crap, he shouldn't have said that. But that you've got the video, and that's why that's video cam evidence is so powerful. So. But God, if you've got deep fakes, like now you're going to need multiple lines of evidence. Like one single video isn't going to mean shit anymore.
I mean, isn't that what you're advocating for? Multiple lines of evidence.
Yeah, but now you would need two cameras. So instead of one, you'd need a second camera, like at a different angle or something. And
I think the solution to this is just everybody needs to constantly be recording themselves and live streaming it at all times. That way, no one can ever show something that you didn't do as you doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Prove me wrong.
Wow.
We solved the issue.
Jeez, yeah. So and you see two people hooking up, you can't say get a room anymore because even that's being recorded in your scenario, right? I mean, like I guess now. So can we turn the cameras off when you're having sex, or like the camera's still on?
No.
Shit, Jesus.
No break in consciousness, even when you're sleeping. That's how you fall victim. Right?
I don't know. Isn't that what the Chinese want to do? Isn't this like the whole social cred thing? Like you're getting, and now you've got a point score, and now how are we going to score it?
Could be fun. You could get some subscribers to your channel.
Yeah,
could be money on it. Could be your just living your life. I think that's more likely the way things go in the future.
Oh God,
it already is. Have you seen these IRL streams?
But no one's going to take risks.
Have you seen these IRL streams on Twitch?
What do you mean?
People. Well, there's some.
Wait, they're just recording themselves?
Some of them, but like there's some big streamers who will just kind of walk around LA with their camera out and just like film what goes on around them. People will locate themselves from their stream, like run up to them and like mess with them and get on the stream, and people watch it all day long, and they donate like hundreds and thousands of dollars. Even
this guy's like joking around with people around. I mean, like
they're joking for the most part, but like it gets kind of dangerous sometimes. You get people just looking for their like 5 seconds of fame, and like it just takes one guy to walk up on stream, pull a gun out, and like start doing that. But there's been some interesting things. This is very off topic, but this guy, like he was live streaming it, and he has a speaker attached to him, so that like when you donate money over a certain amount, you can type in a message, and the speaker will like do like a text to speech thing and play that out. And there's been instances of these people going into like classrooms and someone like reading like a bomb threat, and then they get sent to jail because of it, because you're causing a bomb threat in like a public like university building.
Wow. Okay. Or like on a plane or something.
But I guess maybe it's tied full circle here. These people, they are trailblazers in a certain way. They're breaking laws that have never been broken before. Right. They're breaking rules that don't exist. To that extent, is there an assumed, for cases going forward where new technologies develop, or new instances, where new structures, new individuals, and new institutions arise, is there an assumed rule set that we all are playing by?
No, that has to be aggregated. This is true with like the invention of railroads, the invention of telephones.
The first person to invent
power
something
lines
and to exploit every by it isn't breaking a law.
Well, no, not exploit, but like, so the first, do you see the pictures of like New York in like 1890s, early 1900s? Like there are lines everywhere, like power lines, because you have like telephone companies and then power line companies. They're all using different lines because I'm a power company, I'm not going to let you use my lines, right? So like there's there's just lines everywhere. So they had to standardize that. They're like, look, we're gonna have to make these public utilities.
Back when we were great, like you said, right? Back after World War II, when things were great. Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to standardize it.
This is collusion. All these companies working together.
In the railroads, like that, there would be the track sizes weren't the same. So the width of the tracks is now standardized. But before you could have some tracks that were like 4 feet, some were 4.5. Like, to screw somebody else so their trains can't run on your track, and the competition that doesn't exist anymore.
Good old days.
Yeah, but look what happened. I mean, that they didn't call them robber barons for nothing.
Heroes. That's what I call them. There's really no answer, I guess, going forward.
But part of it is viewpoint too. I think what you have to do is like, and we had one that I wanted to bring this up because we were talking to a number of people today on Twitter about Lauren Chen's comments. So there's about a 28-second thing that we'll quick play here.
Right at the end here.
Well, we'll insert it.
Most recently, and in my opinion, upsettingly, there is this piece as well. Just a few days ago, Teen Vogue released this article, which detailed how to get an abortion if you're a teen without your parents knowing. I honestly find it really, really hard to defend what the West has become sometimes. Just on principle, I think right now a crusade may be exactly what we need. Even if you are pro-choice, you've got to admit there's an issue of being age appropriate that has gone out the window here. This is the kind of material that today's young women are growing up with. And if this is what they're reading when they're 15 or 16, what do you think they're going to be like in their 20s or their 30s? This is why we can't ignore the issue of culture or outlets like Teen Vogue. Do you really think that any girl who grows up reading this filth when she turns 18 is going to cast a vote for a Republican or any conservative?
Anyway, so Lauren's comments here are clearly coming from a conservative bent. She's pro-life. She's upset with this article in Teen Vogue that, with kids being able to get abortions without parental consent. But she calls for a crusade. And to me, when I hear crusade, like, I guess I'm biased in some way because I like Lauren, but I also know her and I've consumed enough of her content and I've seen her argue against violence enough times to where when I see she clearly means, maybe that wasn't the right choice of words, right? Fine, that's critiquable, but I do not think that in any real way that she's calling for violence. I don't believe it. But other people that were saying, look, Brian, and they were arguing on Twitter, enough people, and they were citing themselves. We all think that's where it seems to be, it's fooling enough people that why aren't you something? I'm like, I get it, but I don't think any of those people would say watch the amount of content. If you come in with a preconceived bias, you might be like, that's something that a kind of a crazy pro-lifer might say. Like you could have that, and like, okay, fine. I mean, I get where they're coming from, but I think it's really important to take part of your bias. And one of the people that was doing this woman who she's very into mental health. She had this brilliant video on Jordan Peterson. Basically, she's not a Jordan Peterson fan, but what she's saying is Jordan Peterson's rehab right now. But she was saying it's very important that critics of Peterson don't use this rehab thing to knock him over the head because you're actually hurting mental health. So she could put aside her biases and be completely objective about that. But then
she doesn't dislike Peterson as much as she.
Well, no, she doesn't like him. But she was saying, yeah, right, like her care for mental health is so high that she really doesn't want people to use partisan politics to screw it up.
I got you.
Right? And that's totally fair. Totally fair.
A couple things, I guess. One, I think we talked about this a little bit before, is that I think people are maybe overreacting to her use of the word crusade, or I don't actually don't. Is it crusade or
crusade? We need a crusade.
But at the same time, it's also a very loaded term. Especially, it's a time when things were very violent. Things were very really taking a extreme stance for your side of things. It's you fought. You literally went to where your enemies were, destroyed them in order to preserve your way of things.
Right. But this is what everybody was doing in the 11th century. Right? Like, right. Was any nation completely different?
Pretty universally condemned at this point.
Right. I agree. But I'm saying they were like, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying, like, if you look at all the morality of the time.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you're referring to this thing that at the time was perhaps morally neutral, but is now seen as
Correct.
a certain way. But now you're saying, let's do it again. Which has a different connotation.
But she's saying that you're using the connotation.
Maybe it was a bad use of words, but some would argue it's not fair to jump on her, but I think people jump on your left-leaning figures. Your AOC is saying never forget. There's kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, this is fair.
The same way, like it's
the concentration camp, right? I think is the best example.
If you're gonna, the concentration camps. If you're gonna jump at someone for the connotations that could be implied from the use of a specific word, you have to apply that equally.
Okay, fine. That's the best counter argument I've heard. No one made that to me on Twitter, but yeah, if you would no, seriously, if they would have said that's actually a pretty good argument. Like saying, hey, you've been a critic, and I have been a critic of AOC using concentration camp. I don't like that. I think that again, that's suggesting that it's more like, again, the first thing I think of is Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Sobibor, something like that. Like these are awful camps,
right.
And these camps are just not even in that clue. And I don't think AOC even thinks that they are. I think that she's trying to get people's hackles up. Now,
like using the word crusade.
Yeah, now maybe she's doing the same thing. So perhaps the critique that Lauren ought to avoid that word and AOC ought to avoid, then pick different words, that might be a very valid critique. But if that was a critique that only she should use a different word, I could concede to it. But to say she's actually calling for violence, I don't think she is, and I don't think AOC actually believes that these concentration camps are anywhere close to where the Nazis were.
Right, but they're yin and yang of the same side of the discourse, But I digress.
But it's important to give people the benefit of the doubt.
I would say is that, you said you watch a lot of Lauren's content, you can see that she advocates for peace. This kind of is very, to assume she's advocating for violence here is very
It's
countercurrent to what she usually talks about. But
it's counterfactual to what I've heard.
Someone like Ben Shapiro, like Kaya Klinsky, which I think Lauren Chen is kind of up there in that same sort of realm of punditry. You have to be aware that the people who will see your content aren't people who watch all of your content. They don't know you the way that you might assume that someone watching you does. Like you're putting your voice out there on the. I don't know who's going to watch this podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Take something completely. They don't know me, so I have to kind of pick and choose my words carefully. Kind of really make sure the message that I'm delivering is the message I want to deliver. And I think, and she edited this. Was this live? I actually don't know.
I don't know.
But being aware of someone in her place of knowing that you're on the internet, I think that you should be a little more careful with the words you choose if you don't mean them.
Right. Now, people are going to make mistakes. Everyone screws up. So, let's say that if we were the critique that she shouldn't have used that word, what obligation then does she have? Should she come out and say, "Hey, sorry, I shouldn't use the word crusade"? I mean, what makes up for it?
It's a good question. I'm not saying she has to prostrate herself on the floor at the court of public opinion or anything.
Right.
But don't make a habit of it. I will get mad at whatever you say. You can't please everyone. It's just the way things are.
But that's the best argument I've heard, at least to that.
I just listen to it. I think I don't want to tell Lauren Chen how to like live her life, but I know at least when I face criticism, I become very antagonistic. I'm like, no, you're wrong. This is fine. Just like listen to criticism, things out, and like and just consider back to the topic at large. All comes in a circle here. Like, what if I am wrong? What if I was wrong about this? Like, could I be wrong? And like, and just kind of take a look at it. Don't just assume that you're right all the time, because you probably aren't.
Yeah.
But,
no, and I also think, too, if you're trying to convince somebody, it's probably best not to point the finger. I think part of it on Twitter, there's people like, how can you not, do you not know history? Do you not know this? You know, like, how could you possibly believe she isn't calling for violence? I'm like, all right, right away, you're probably set yourself up to not be convincing.
I think, too, if anybody's opinion has ever been changed due to a Twitter argument.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it depends on if it's civil. Like, you can be nice on Twitter, too.
I'll say, relative to the amount of Twitter arguments had, to the amount of people convinced, I would say it's an abysmally low number, so much so that it's never worth your time to participate in.
Right, I know. But I think engagement, like, at least you're getting the opposing side. At least, even if I can't agree, at least I sussed out their positions of why they think that. If you
want to add one thing to the pro column, to the massive list of cons in this scenario, then by all means consider that.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. There's a massive list of cons, but I mean, I don't. It exposes you to there's a ton of viewpoints that I've heard on Twitter that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I'm like, holy cow! Like, some people actually do think this.
Yeah,
right?
It's not
now I can't be 100% sure they're totally trolling. So, you know, but I don't know what's out there. So I'm always skeptical. I assume that actually the people that are on the other end of that thing are probably a lot nicer than they appear on Twitter. That I'm sure of.
I like to think of people in the same way, but at the same time, whenever I see people acting like this, like online, I have to wonder, like, what is it about you that like makes you act like this? Do you derive some sort of pleasure from just getting on Twitter and trolling people and just like making them angry? Like that seems like a very, very chaotic person.
But there's less of those people. There's some of those people, but I think most it's defend yourself. So your viewpoint, your viewpoint's out there, and now it's been critiqued. You've either been mobbed or 3 or 4 people are on you. You're defending yourself.
But do you know what'll fix that?
What?
If you just don't post on Twitter in the first place.
I mean, I suppose that's a good point. But yeah, but I think that a lot of it is like you want to defend your because some people will just jump in.
Is a net loss. I'm making the stands right now.
I don't know. I can't. It is accessible. There's so many bad things.
Is, but the current president of the United States of America. Everything you post, net loss. I guess.
But there's some good things. There's some good things on Twitter too. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I have learned a lot too.
I think the worst thing Twitter's ever done is given everybody an equal voice. Hot take. But man, when everybody has an equal voice, it's just the cacophony.
But they don't. I mean, when you have more followers and you blast it out, you have a much bigger voice than the person that has no followers.
You can actually hide replies now. Did you see that?
Really?
Yeah. If you get like in theory, if you have a viral tweet that blows up and you get some replies that you don't like, you can hide them. People can like go and like hit a button
and hide all replies.
And go look at the not just some of them. They can look at the replies you've hidden, but it's a couple extra steps. That's all it takes for people to not really care to look at them anymore. So you can really kind of craft your image and response.
It's not bad. That's not bad. Even Twitter was aware of this. Even Dorsey and those guys were trying to figure out
this is Twitter,
what the reply button, and the how they were going to do it. Because I think they know that it's toxic, but what do you do?
It's inherently toxic,
right? But I don't. But Facebook did a decent thing. Like there was a time where about a year that Facebook was horribly toxic, and all these people that you didn't know were also in your feed. And now at least it's the people you know. So you tend not to fight with them as badly as your strangers.
I suppose so. And I think we reached this point where your Facebook profile is you.
Yeah.
Like, if you say something, people will trace that back to you.
Yeah.
On Twitter, that's not really the case.
That's true.
You can be.
Yeah,
but you need to really make it intentionally linked to something like that.
So, you can be a different person.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point. So, I don't know. Yeah, Twitter is interesting. I've not made up my mind on that. But
net loss.
Net loss. All right, I'm gonna even go with to be intellectually humble and stipulate to that until I can prove you wrong. But thanks for hanging out with us. If you are still with us here at the end, our cultural insanity. Fire some topics in the comment if you want us to bring this in. to another discussion where you're more interested in this because you didn't like this one or you want to see something different, or if we should do it in a live stream and you guys want to comment in any ideas on how to improve this. We're just kind of trying to throw something out there and have some more reasonable conversations, because we do definitely agree that most Twitter conversations are terrible.
Yeah, I'm still actually, so this is kind of an experiment we're working on together. I still have yet to edit the first one, but slowly I want to start we're still kind of trying to figure out how this is going to look going forward. So really open to any sort of feedback or suggestions. Probably even going to talk about that at some point, have like a feedback section. Could be interesting, but yeah. Hopefully we'll get this one out, and then starting with our next one, we'll be able to start getting some feedback from the first 2 episodes. So please comment. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.